Next curve.
Hey everybody, this is Leonard Lee, executive analyst of Next Curve, and I am here once again for another installment of From the RAN to the RIC. And this is a series that we are running this year in collaboration with EJL Wireless Research, and I have Earl Lum, the grand poobah of EJL, joining me. And hey Earl, how's it going, man?
It's going great, and thanks again for having me back.
Yeah, nice shirt.
Thank you.
So I take it you've been wearing it for a whole week?
Yes, I have.
All right, that's what I figured. Yeah, you have to buy new clothes, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, that will be funded from the incredible revenues and royalties that this event and the others will generate for me.
Speaking of events, if you're going to MWC 2023, holler at us. We're going to both be there, and we're going to do some coverage there jointly, as well as sharing some takes. So, with that, why don't we talk about our topic of the day, which is the state of the Open RAN stack. Is it ready for prime time? And this is a big question that constantly gets put out there. It's a challenge for many of the Open RAN players out there, a challenge that they hate, quite honestly, because many of them will assert that Open RAN is ready. Okay, and when we talk about Open RAN, we're really speaking about more broadly. Okay, we're not talking about specifically the TIP project. It's like open space RAN, not open RAN, one word, or ORAN. And, I don't know if we have to rehash the definitions, but last week we kind of talked about vRAN and ORAN and differences between the two, right? And it seems like there's still a lot of confusion about that, right? Quite simply put, this is the thing. vRAN is just virtualized RAN. The whole disaggregation and that whole concept, software defining the RAN to whatever degree you can applies there. Open RAN is just a version of that. It's just you're using quote unquote open interfaces, right? That basically are exposed at the different disaggregated standard disaggregated points or splits in the RAN architecture that you are looking at or looking to deploy. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so cool. Now, as we're talking about Open RAN stack, is it ready? I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I don't know what you've seen, Earl, but the way and how you think about this, but I really think about it, when we look at the Open RAN world, it really is dependent on the vendor or the collective that's actually trying to put something to market, right? And I think a good example is, and I brought it up in the first episode, is Rakuten, because they're the first ones to go to market with the first quote unquote open RAN network, right?
Right.
And that happens to be called Rakuten Mobile. And in order to realize that network, which they launched 2 years ago, they had to cut some corners and do some purpose-built stuff to make that happen, right? Because certain interfaces weren't well defined enough, and there was an agreement. The ORAN standards were still, and the interface definitions were still evolving. And in order to make this network happen, I mean, they had to kind of nudge the ball forward, and that meant doing some, bespoke things for their own network.
Right, because of the timing of their launch and where they needed to be, and where the rest of the market was evolving.
Yeah, and I think there was a benefit in that happening, because it really egged the whole movement along, so that the standards would start to put attention to certain priority working groups that would then establish, let's say, more of the priority or the critical interface requirements. And now I think one of the challenges, though, is that I think there's a lot of vendors that are still in that dilemma given the state of the standards themselves, right? So depending on which vendor or collective, if you will, you're talking about, I think the state of the Open RAN stack differs. Depends on, well, how much integration have they done? How much of the actual capabilities have they mustered together to actually deliver on a network? I mean, that bottom line, that's what determines stack readiness in this open world, right? Because it's not proprietary. It's not like, we can easily go and say, hey, look, Nokia or Huawei or Ericsson's RAN stack is ready, right?
Right.
But you follow what I'm getting at?
I think if you look at the lower layers, right, of the RAN, and specifically 1, 2, and 3, and specifically 1 on the physical layer, and then obviously between 2 and 3, if we're looking at it from the switching and the routing, right, between the frames and the packets and all of that other fun stuff that is not necessarily part of the real radio and the RF, where I'm very focused on, and the antennas and such on that technology, that is probably in a state where you can get a radio from one of the members out there, and you can, whether it's a non-massive MIMO or whether it's a massive MIMO, you can then get a BBU combination or a DUCU if someone actually wants to go that route, depending on what makes sense and where they want to place these physical boxes, and then work with hopefully a functioning front haul interface for the transport, and then your mid haul / back haul, depending on, again, if you're using a DUCU or if you're using a straight up layers 1, 2, and 3 BBU out there for the solution. And then once you pass that point of layer 3 and the transport, now we're in an area where I don't play in, which is kind of then the sessions, presentations, applications layer, and where the eventual RIC is going to, have its home, right?
Right.
And the question then becomes, in every one of those layers, there's standards that have to be done for what defines the functionality of each one of those layers. And I'm not sure where all of those layers in terms of completion are at this point. Like you were saying, it really depends. If you're working down in layers 1, 2, and 3, maybe from your perspective, it's all figured out and done, but it still needs the other layers to work if you're an operator or an end customer.
Yeah, and I think that's where the vendors and I guess these emerging class of SIs and a lot of the as you and I saw, actually witnessed at the Mavenir analyst event, many of them are actually positioning themselves to become SIs, right? Because what they realize is, look, we have these bits and pieces, we have the standards, we have these frameworks, but there's still a lot of engineering that needs to go into bridging and integrating everything together, and then testing for it, validating, and all these things that never went away because everything is supposedly going software defined, et cetera, et cetera. But I think that's where the challenge is. And so when we start to talk about stack readiness, it goes back to what we talked about before. It's nice that you have these frameworks, but that's not the implementation. It's also not the technology, right? And even from a software perspective, the way that the different functions and the applications that deliver those functions are expressed in software are going to differ, right? And so hardware, same thing, right? And then you have that whole integration bit. And so when we look at stack readiness, I think it's almost irrelevant. It's really a question for the vendors, like, how ready are you to go to market with this stuff?
And what is it they're going to market with? If we go back to the Mavenir example, they were a software company.
Yes.
But they're not anymore.
No.
And what forced them to make that switch or pivot? And if you're, let's say, an Indian software company that has a core, can you just sell the core? Or are you now forced to bundle the whole thing end to end? And now you're going to have to make radios. And how complicated is that going to be for you? And as an organization that only knows how to code, and you've never made a PCB in your life, you've never routed RF, you know an antenna is some rectangular thing that hangs off of a tower, but that's about it. And now you have to make this stuff or find the right vendors to partner with. And you're starting from zero or less than zero. And for the RF guys, do they ever want to go into the software side? No, because they know what they're good at. And they want to stay in their lane, so to speak. If you're on the software side, I think everyone on the software side is getting way out of their lane and taking up the whole freeway.
I think so. And I think that was a realization that happened probably about a year and a half ago when I was talking about Squid Game, which is what we're going to talk about next time. And so this is the end of our time box here. So everybody, thanks for joining us. Remember to follow us at www.next-curve.com. Check out EJL Wireless Research. Follow us, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and you're just going to get crazy insights. I mean, you know, you're going to get Earl showing you friggin' boards and chips and stuff.
Yeah, and I've been drinking this bourbon for a week now. So
yeah, a whole week and wearing the same shirt. It's like absolutely ridiculous. And he smells. It's horrible.
A bourbon. Thanks, Leonard.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, we'll see you next time. Okay. And
goodbye.
Yeah. See you later.